May I now request Mr. Amitabh Dattu to kindly welcome the gathering and give his inaugural remarks.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this edition of the webinar series of the Calcutta Management Association. Well, to tell you a little bit about the Management Day. On the occasion of AIMA's Golden Jubilee in 2006, the then President of India, Dr. Kalam, had declared February 21st as the National Management Day. From 2007 onwards, AIMA celebrates the National Management Day on the 21st, and the other LMAs like the Calcutta Management Association celebrate the National Management Day maybe a couple of days before or after the 21st of February. So this year we are celebrating it on the 26th, and we are fortunate to have with us Mr. Kirloskar, Mr. Sanjay Kirloskar, who is the chairman and MD Kirloskar Brothers, and also moderating the session is Mr. Dr. Gupta who's a partner with Deloitte to Matsu, India. We are particularly fortunate that we have Mr. Sanjay Kirloskar, because he's somebody we have been looking forward to for a very, very long time. Unfortunately, he was extremely busy because he was running the affairs of the All India Management Association. And it is very relevant, what he's going to talk about today. I mean, capitalizing on a crisis. He, along with Ms. Rekha Sethi and the whole team of the All India Management Association, have done a brilliant job in actually proving to the world how you can actually take advantage of a crisis. And in fact, you'd be all very happy to know. And in fact, we've learned from we had Ms. Sethi coming and speak to our executive committee as to how they have been able to take advantage of the crisis, how to learn from the crisis, and how to change the leadership styles, your strategy, etc. Keeping in mind the challenges thrown up by the crisis that faces you. So I personally look forward to Mr. Kirloskar's talk today. And I'm sure all of you here would actually benefit tremendously from what Mr. Kirloskar has been saying, what he will share with us, because he has actually demonstrated what he's going to talk about. And I'm particularly thankful to him for agreeing to speak to us today. And thank you, Jaydeep, for being with us all the time. And incidentally, Mr. Dr. Gupta is also a very senior past president of the Calcutta Management Association, and an extremely supportive person, somebody always willing to help the cause of Calcutta Management Association whenever it's required. So thank you very much once again, Mr. Kirloskar and Mr. Jaydeep. And over to you, Jaydeep.
Thank you so much, Amitabh. I'll only take a couple of minutes to set the context as I see it. First of all, welcome to Mr. Kirloskar from my side. It's a real privilege having you to share your thoughts on this topic, and particularly at this juncture, and I'll explain why. Thank you also to our audience who have turned out in large numbers for what promises to be a very insightful session. As the pandemic hit us, possibly this is the most severe economic and health crisis to ever hit the world. Okay? The health part, of course, is absolutely known to all of us. It started off with statistics, and then it moved from statistics to people we actually know, to ourselves, and you never knew whether it's just going to be a mild case, asymptomatic case, or whether it's going to be a lot worse than that. So I don't think, and this is global. Any other, we've never really seen a pandemic in our lifetimes earlier, which is a global pandemic. So very severe crisis. But at the same time, the economy also suffered a huge knock, which was a knock both on the demand side and the supply side together. In earlier crises, it's either been the demand side or the supply side that has been hit. But for the first time, it was both, and again, it was global. Okay. Now, different companies responded to this in different ways, and I think the first reaction of most companies was common, which was respond. I need to respond to this crisis. And what was that response? That response was, how do I keep the bulbs on? Okay? How do I make sure that all my people have connectivity? Okay? And how do we just keep serving or fulfilling the commitments that we've made to our customers and so on? So responding was the first part of the first reaction was, how do I respond? Okay? The second part, once that response was dealt with, and it was not business as usual, but business somehow, it then moved to, okay, now how can I recover and get back to where I was? But we are seeing that some of our clients have gone beyond recover, and some of our clients are in the zone of thrive. Now, what is thrive? That is what we are here to talk about today, which is how can I turn the lessons learned and the context to an advantage, a business advantage for my company, and that is something that we'd like to explore today in the discussion. Clearly, initially, the focus was on how do I interface with my customers, and there were digital interventions and very rapid deployments of digital means of interfacing with customers, of looking at how within the organization people can work from anywhere, how the entire supply chain can be rejigged to be able to uh, uh, you know possibly deal with a lot of supply disruptions that had happened globally as a result of this. Okay? But now there are lessons learned, and that is very interesting. I think we are sitting at a very interesting juncture where now that the pandemic seems to be receding, and hopefully it will recede very soon. Uh, uh, as and when the pandemic recedes, we should not lose the advantages that we gained. So we are at a juncture where we can lapse back into the inefficiencies of the past, or we can thrive through the lessons learned and create for ourselves a new, more efficient, differentiated context for the future, which will help our enterprises to thrive. So now let's start talking about how to thrive. And with these few words, I'd like to request Mr. Kirloskar to share his perspectives both on the lessons learned as well as on the ideas of how to thrive both at a corporate level, but also for all of us at an individual level. Over to you, Mr. Kirloskar. This is a privilege to have you because you have a global perspective, not just a domestic perspective. Over to you, Mr. Kirloskar.
Thank you, Mr. Datta and Mr. Datta Gupta. It's a real pleasure for me to be with the Calcutta Management Association, and I'd like to thank all of you and the office bearers for inviting me to speak to you today. I hope all of you are safe and taking care of yourselves. Like we discussed just before this session started, the pandemic or the virus has once again reared its ugly head where I am in Pune. And I'm worried that many of the old restrictions would be not only reintroduced, but strictly enforced. My congratulations to CMA's leadership for organizing such webinars to help its stakeholders navigate the current health and economic situation. I'm aware that, Ms. Rekha Sethi, our Director General at AIMA, she also reacted very quickly. And I was telling her, and I was telling all the office bearers at AIMA, that there was a lot that we learned from the way Ms. Sethi was running AIMA and how quickly she reacted and turned around the situation to her advantage. But thank you for giving me an opportunity to share a few thoughts on gaining from this crisis instead of becoming a victim. Never waste a crisis is a cliche, but it captures the essence of the indomitable human spirit. If one sees only problems, then one succumbs to them. Whereas if one looks for opportunities, one can emerge stronger from a potentially fatal situation. A crisis is certainly disruptive and destructive, but it can also be a source of liberation. When things are beyond one's control, one can shed old worries and see things from an entirely new perspective. After all, one man's loss can be another person's gain. During the COVID period, many enterprises have been knocked over by loss of revenues and profits, but many others have capitalized on this crisis. While some have been coincidental beneficiaries, such as providers of food, hygiene supplies, digital gadgets, and cloud services, many others have pivoted radically to make the best use of this crisis. They've changed their business and operating models, repurposed assets and the workforce, and entered completely new lines of products and services to tap into the big shift in demand. There is a long list of beneficiaries of the COVID crisis. The most obvious ones have been the makers of respiratory masks, sanitizers, processed food, kitchen and cleaning appliances. And Ms. Sethi, I believe, is also on this call. She knows that I learned how to bake during the crisis. And in my family, the banana bread I made or the pound cake that I made, and these are very simple things, but they were very popular. So kitchen appliances, computers, cloud-based software, streaming and entertainment services, all of them have never had it so good. Then there were those who repurposed their assets and workforce to cater to the suddenly changed demand. Alcohol, sugar, and perfume companies introduced sanitizers. Garment companies offered masks. Auto companies delivered ventilators and air separators. Pharma and food companies pushed fortified supplements. But on the other hand, many enterprises struggled because of the COVID crisis. A few companies in the manufacturing, construction, and transportation businesses have been upended by the sudden and drastic disruption. Even some of the biggest companies found it difficult to adapt quickly and adequately. Only the paranoid and the prepared have done all right, and some have even minted a fortune during this crisis. I think many of you are aware of Andy Grove, the founder of Intel. He wrote a book called Only the Paranoid Survive. So I guess there is some truth in that title. The availability of COVID vaccines has given the world the hope of a quick end to this pandemic and a return to some semblance of normalcy. However, it's still early days. And while it will take some time before this vaccine is available to everyone, and there is general confidence in the safety and effectiveness of these rushed vaccines. For the moment, the coronavirus is still going strong and mutating, and enterprises have to accept the new habits and priorities will last. You know, we built our corporate office about 12 years ago, and I really do not know when it will be full again, or whether we will ever expect everyone to come to the office every single day. And therefore, we may need to repurpose this asset. In any case, the growing frequency of crises in the new millennium is a signal to enterprises to prepare for the unimaginable crisis in future. The best way to capitalize on this crisis, or any crisis for that matter, is to get fitter for uncertainty and shocks. Today, Indian enterprises have been forced to fundamentally review and revamp their business models, investments, supply chains, organization structures, business processes, technology choices, and innovation orientation. And it is critical that we are not caught napping again. Instead of trying to wait out this crisis or expect a perfect vision of a permanent future, our enterprises need to invest in new kinds of assets, talent, supply chain, technology, partnerships, and market access. The best defense against disruption is not to build moats against it, but to build the capacity to ride it. I know it's easier said than done, But the COVID crisis, like many others before it, has shown that hope is not a strategy. Remember the old saying, change is the only constant. This is the part of that continuous change that we need to prepare for. The twin crises of COVID and economic recession have opened up new opportunities everywhere. Disruption has shaken up incumbents and created new openings for players in all markets, provided they can outsmart and outrun the incumbents in introducing newer technologies and more innovative business models. Financial pressures and continuing uncertainty require radical reimagining of costs and value creation. The pervasive switch to digital technologies by businesses and consumers offers a great opportunity to cut costs and improve productivity by going virtual and automating essential processes. In fact, a large number of enterprises have avoided going under this crisis by using technology to save costs and increase productivity. In a crisis, cash saved is cash gained. In fact, as is well known, companies go bankrupt not because they make loss, but because they run out of cash. And for me, when this pandemic began, the main worry when everything started closing down last March was whether we would run out of cash. Even more important was the obligation to pay all our vendors, whether large or small, who had trust in us and delivered components for our products that were to be delivered before the last financial year end. I believe all of us must learn to do business with fewer assets and smaller staffs. We need to combine technology and partnerships to expand business and increase profitability. Enterprises which use this crisis to become more efficient and frugal have a much better chance in a post-COVID economy. COVID and its attendant geopolitical turmoil have also created new opportunities for Indian enterprises. The disruption of the China-centric global supply chains has made companies look for suppliers elsewhere in Asia. And I wouldn't mind admitting that our company is one of the beneficiaries of that. India is one of the countries that they are looking at, and it is up to all of us to show that we can compete against the Chinese on cost, quality, and reliability. This window of opportunity is not going to remain open for long, especially as some authoritarian regimes in Asia can offer guarantees of labor availability, low costs, and global scale of output at any schedule. Capitalizing on this crisis requires Indian enterprises to show that they can be innovative, efficient, affordable, and reliable without needing the support of a draconian administration. As a company, we too realized that there were many ideas that could be introduced to our customers. Well, actually, one was over a decade old, but there was just too much resistance to its acceptance earlier. Since 2008, we had been monitoring and controlling the water supply system in our company's township from our corporate office 200 kilometers away in Pune. And we do the same in a Pune suburb where a developer had created a small city. Suddenly, with all-round closures, many of our customers could not have people coming into work in their plants, but had to run them. They have seen the benefit of such systems, which we are now able to sell in ever-increasing numbers. Our government has tried to help Indian enterprises by making it difficult and expensive to consume Chinese products and services. This is a particularly vital time for manufacturing of digital devices and the provision of digital services in India. Our market for anything and everything digital has multiplied during the past year. And this is an opportunity for Indian enterprises to enter and grow. While global tech giants dominate in core applications, Indian enterprises can beat them when it comes to locally relevant applications of technology. Healthcare, education, skilling, retail, and agriculture are some of the obvious areas where Indian innovators can use the current crisis to make big gains. Real estate and urban services are also areas of new opportunities in the post-COVID era. The digitalization of life and work will lead to dispersal of high-end workforce from densely populated urban areas. That means a need for urban type of housing and commercial properties outside or far from big cities. Indian enterprises need to keep an eye on this trend and prepare themselves to provide urban services in non-urban areas. The crisis has also shaken up travel, tourism, hotels, art and entertainment businesses. There are new opportunities for entry and innovation in these sectors. Health concern and the need for social distancing will remain, even after vaccines give people the confidence to move and mingle. Technology will be a key differentiator once again in capitalizing on consumers' need for health, safety, as well as remote gratification. This is an area where incumbents are ripe for disruption by new innovators. COVID has also highlighted the interconnectedness of the world and increased sensitivity to climate change and human rights issues. Governments everywhere are competing to announce aggressive deadlines to make their economies carbon neutral, and consumers in the rich world are interested in knowing the ethicality of products and services. This is disrupting established supply chains and markets, and Indian enterprises have an opportunity to position themselves appropriately to benefit from these trends. They can reduce their carbon footprint by using more renewable energy and avoiding unnecessary transportation and travel. As Western governments begin to link trade with clean technologies and human rights, acting as non-tariff trade barriers, exporting Indian enterprises will need to make this switch quickly. We, as a company, actually, we had feared as much when the first round of international standards like ISO 9000 came up in the 1990s, forcing us to be amongst the first Indian companies to adopt such standards for quality, occupational safety, and the environment, amongst others. And as it stands, like many other Indian companies, manufacturing companies, we have put in about 4 megawatts of wind power, over 5 megawatts of rooftop solar power, contributing to about 35% of our energy requirements. And we intend to go further. For our customers as well, we've seen, and this is through products, that in continuous industrial processes, small pumps running as turbines can replace other pressure reducing system components to generate electricity, and thereby creating a new product, a new market for our products, while helping them reduce their dependence on fossil fuels. Though COVID is currently exercising us greatly, the elephant in the room remains climate change, as we've recently seen in Texas. Therefore, those who prepare for the extreme climate scenario, as is being predicted, will also gain in the future. Really, despite the devastation caused by the current crisis, there is no dearth of opportunities for the willing and able. The quicker our enterprises acquire fitness from the emerging business environment, the better they will be able to capitalize not only on this crisis, but whatever is thrown up against us in future. I believe going forward, if we have the right policies, we will be one of the lucky countries, because not only do we have talented people well versed in the latest technologies, we also have one of the largest consumer markets. For quite some time, I had been worried that new applications like Industry 4.0, the Internet of Things, augmented reality, virtual reality, etc., would result in manufacturing moving back to the developed world, or onshoring as they call it, as less and less people are required to man the process. But as our economy grows to become more attractive, I think this worry will pass, as every manufacturer will need to be as close as possible to the customer and to the trends that keep coming up, to the latest styles that keep coming up in textiles, the latest, whatever that comes up in different areas of the market. And therefore, I feel that our government must have the right policies to encourage job creation in India for Indians. Of course, as an Indian manufacturer, I hope that our government will also support Indian manufacturers, giving them the opportunity to develop new ideas and accept cutting-edge technology products designed in India, thereby creating new jobs right from design to after-sales service for Indians who live in India. Of course, nothing comes easy, and we will have to put in hard and smart work to ensure that we continue to develop well into the future. Thank you again for this opportunity to address you. I will now hand this back to Mr. Anirban Bhattacharjee of the CMA. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. May I request Mr. Jadip Dattagupta, sir, can you read the questions on the chat box? I have sent 3, or I may.
I will read questions from the chat box, but I'm not. But later, I'm not going to lose this opportunity.
Please, sir, sorry.
To have a bit of a chat with Mr. Kirloskar, because he said
that will be best. Thank you, sir.
Very, very interesting things. Okay. And I do believe that, at some stage he might write a book on this, because if we had recorded everything he said, and I'm sure anyone you've done that, that is the beginnings of a book, right? Which would be a very fascinating read. I think what you did point out, sir, was that...
Please call me Sanjay.
Yes.
Call me Sanjay.
Right, you could call me Joydeep, please. Okay. I think what you did point out was that it might, the whole context might be a threat or an end game for certain companies, but for those who are able to become efficient and innovative, okay, it could be a huge opportunity. There are opportunities around finding our way or creating space for us in the global supply chain. Okay, and one of the arguments in favor of India is the large consumer market, and which is becoming more and more of a significant market as we go along. But a very interesting point that you made was around climate change. That if we want to participate in the global economy, then increasingly governments are coming under pressure everywhere from their electorates to drive legislation that will act as non-tariff barriers to trade, unless we can comply with those aspirations or asks of the consumer in those countries, and therefore everyone in such countries. So I think this is a very, very insightful observation that you made. Would you care to elaborate on that a little bit? Because people think that, oh, climate change, that's a thing for US and Europe, and our problem is hunger. Our problem is how to feed our people. We can't be worried about climate change at this point. Okay, how is it linked? Can you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
I think there are many studies that point out that countries like ours are actually going to be the biggest victims of climate change. A few years ago, the National Geographic had an article on climate change and the effect it's going to have on different countries. And they had made a map. Obviously National Geographic is known for all the articles, and from time to time in different stories, they have historical maps, or they have all kinds of other maps. They had made a map of what would happen if the climate rose by 2 degrees by the end of this century, and what would the Earth look like. And for all of you in Calcutta, I'm sorry to say you would be underwater. So this is not something that is not going to affect us. It is something that's going to affect us. I guess the awareness is possibly more in Europe than in America, but globally there is awareness. And what do we do with when people start moving? For example, the Maldives, they are hardly, the average altitude of the Maldives is 6 feet above water, right? And there are many other islands in the Pacific. So for humans, it's going to be a huge, it's going to have a huge impact. On the other side, what I have noticed, I started working in the 1980s. And what I have noticed is earlier in the 90s through GATT negotiations and before it became WTO and all that, the West was saying that, we need to globalize. And people should have the latest technologies around the world. Different countries should not be protectionist. They should allow the best products to come in, et cetera, et cetera. Little realizing that over a period of time, since salaries were lower over here, many of their own large companies would find it beneficial to move to China first. And I don't think we've really got as much investment, maybe because of our policies, maybe because of where we are in the world. But most of that investment went to China, Southeast Asia, resulting in the hollowing out of manufacturing in many Western countries. My company is the biggest pump manufacturer in Great Britain, right? There are many British companies who've just died because they were not competitive. We are competitive because we make stuff over there which we don't make over here, which is real high-end products for the oil and gas industry. But it has resulted in many people losing their jobs, number one. And this has resulted in events like the election of President Trump, for example. But in the 90s itself, we saw that as Eastern or Asian companies started getting more and more competitive, obviously we had to meet Western standards. It's been good for us. I mean, my plant was audited and someone said there was one individual who they found not wearing a helmet, and therefore we were rejected, right? Shell rejected us because someone was not wearing a helmet. Someone else rejected us because the road to our plant, was dangerous. You know how roads in India are compared to their roads. Then this issue about child labor, everything. What is the West? To my mind, it's a good thing what they are trying to do, but they are trying to raise the standards, basically to see how jobs can stay in their own countries. I was very surprised that one of the first things that President Joe Biden did when he took over on the 20th of January. On the 25th of January, he came out with a executive order for Make in America, right? Make in America for the benefit of America, American workers, American businesses, for our national security. I mean, it's a long or executive order that's available on the White House website if anyone cares to read it. And you could say it's protectionism in another way. And I have seen that when I tried to participate from India in an American contract, and this was earlier when Obama was still president, they said your manufacturing facility should be within 500 miles. You should have had a turnover of $100 million per year in America for the last 5 years. All kinds of conditions, basically ensuring that only one American company could take part. So, we should not be embarrassed about saying make in India, which was the last part of my speech. Make in India and ensure that technology is developed in India. For our national security, we need to develop technology in India because no one is going to give it to us for free. Or they're going to put in so many conditions that it's going to be useless if we try to use it. And that is one area, so for me, climate change, we have to be worried about it. We have to be worried about protectionism outside. I have tried to make my company as independent as possible as far as that is concerned, because we have one plant in the US, we have one plant in the UK, we have another plant in Europe, in the Netherlands, we have a plant in Thailand, we have a plant in South Africa. So, almost all the trade blocks we are covered, and we make in those trade blocks. So going forward, one has to look at what is going on around the world, what are the trends, and how do you protect yourself and your organization from those trends. COVID obviously hit everyone out of the blue, but these are things that, I try to look at to see how this company that was established in 1888 lasts another 130 years, right? So I might have digressed from point to point, but I hope that I
No,
made some sense.
I think all of that is very, very valid, and I think one of the reasons why a company which has been around and thrived for more than 100 years obviously has agility. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been around for more than 100 years, and you couldn't be doing exactly the same things that you did 100 years ago. So,
My great grandfather did.
sorry, yeah,
Or my great grandfather did.
yeah, that's right. So it's that ability to keep being ahead of the market that causes a company to sustain, okay, and thrive over time. And those who stick to whatever they were doing, irrespective of consumer market changes and technology changes, will obviously fall off the cliff. So you do know a thing or two about sustaining, which is very interesting. And you said something very interesting, that companies need to start developing new types of assets. Okay? And you said the kind of assets are around human capital, people, right? Patents, innovation, okay? Which are really, you can say, off balance sheet assets rather than land, capital, or machines and so on. It's in the realm of innovation. Now, what is interesting is that then you said market access as well. So the customer dimension, acquire customers, have that customer loyalty, have innovation within, have the best of people, and so on. Now, what's interesting is we are shifting increasingly with robotic process, or with robotics entering the shop floor, manufacturing 4.0, etc. India as a low-cost manufacturer, that may not be a sustainable advantage over the next 2 decades, I think. Okay? However, demonstrating what we've done in the IT industry, okay, I think we have established our place in the global supply chain and IT. Okay? In fact, I had read with some amusement an article some years ago in a Chinese English language newspaper when I was on my way back from Hong Kong or somewhere, which talked about how is it that India does so well in IT? Do we have lessons to learn? So just as we sit here and say, how do they do so well in manufacturing? They are also worried about how we do so well in IT. Okay. So then, is it possible for India to get a new advantage in manufacturing, not because of low-cost labor, but because of superior technological capability, okay, as we have in our IT industry, right? For which we have to invest in new competencies and new cultures in organizations to be able to attract the best of talent, to be able to focus on innovation rather than compliance. Okay? Are we as a society geared for that? And I'll just, I'm sorry, I'm asking a long question. I can see you're struggling to follow where I'm coming from. Okay.
Only like my answer.
Right. But our societal construct has largely been around compliance. You have to grow up and obey, right? Why? Because there was a time when people had to do something very repetitive, as in Charles Chaplin's Modern Times. Someone goes and all day he has to do this. The child has to turn up at the factory at 6 a.m. when the whistle blows and do something repetitive without asking any questions. So the church, the school, family, everyone trained children to be compliant. But now the requirement has shifted to be innovative. Now, if you want to be innovative, you have to question, right? Our society, are we making those societal changes which will be supportive of the changes you are wanting in your business, of people to be innovative, to lead, to take us from being a low-cost manufacturer because of cheap labor to being the winner because we are technologically superior? What is your thought on this?
As a society, I think we're going to move very slowly because we are 2,000, 3,000-year-old culture. And but we've also had people who think out of the box. I mean, if you read Amartya Sen's The Argumentative Indian, India has allowed a lot of freedom. You had the Spanish Inquisition, etc., etc. But many of our people who question God were were allowed to live. They were allowed to say whatever they want to. And I think as a culture, we can say that we are constrained, but we are also a very open and tolerant culture, is my feeling. Number one. Number two, I think it also depends on an organization, how, its own culture and how much it tolerates independence, freedom, uh, gives freedom to its people to fail. Because out of failures, one can learn a lot if one documents exactly how that failure happens. Otherwise, those, like they say, those who don't read history are condemned to repeat it or something like that. But I can only give you examples of my own company. We are in the manufacturing. We've been manufacturing in India since 1901. Before that, we were traders. But we've been looking on the outside, like many other Indian companies who have been looking, and we said that additive manufacturing, right, is going to be something that will hit us going forward, because you really don't need large lines of machines cutting metal. And that's where your point about employment and what is going to happen to employment and et cetera, or low cost employment, whether it's going to be beneficial to us in the future, or whether we should be looked at as a low cost country. Because I'll give you two examples. One was when I was quite young, I'd gone to Japan to see one of our biggest competitors, and he had invested at that time $20 million in a line, which we had a factory to do with something like 800 people, and he had 11 people on that line. And we said, my grandfather, who was still alive at that time, he asked him a question, what happens, how will you ever compete with us with our low cost? He said, you have 700 people. I will be depreciating this asset very quickly in the next few years. So the question for you is, how are you going to compete with 700 people against my 11, right? And that's when it hit me, fortunately, at a young age, that you have to move with technology. So when we heard about additive manufacturing, and now I'm lucky that my kids are also working with me, and my son said, why don't we get a 3D printer, right? And he had the opportunity to go to Airbus, where they were printing the landing gear of Airbus aircraft, the A380, if you believe. And so we went to the manufacturer and we said, we'll develop something with you. We tied him down with the right kind of contract where he can't work with any of our competitors for a few years. And we bought ourselves a huge 3D printer, which makes sand molds, right? So we have our own foundry, we have our own machine shop, etc. But we do things from design. And this 3D printer is capable of making molds 4 meters by 2 meters and 1 meter high. And you can make one piece casting out of that. Or you can make 500, 800 molds in there. And cores, so that you have the right kind of sets that you need. Now, what have we done? We didn't just stop there. Our British company actually has the framework contract to maintain all pumping equipment in the North Sea for Shell, BP, and everyone else. So they need a spare part, right? When they need a spare part, we are the ones who are supposed to supply it. The first thing we do is go to the original equipment supplier and ask him for his delivery period. Sometimes we are lucky, he does it within 2 weeks, because that's the kind of time that is required. If he can't do it in 2 weeks, what we do is we scan that part with a white light scanner, send the file to India, have the mold ready, get the mold made from the drawing that we get from the white light scanner, and we ship a raw casting back to the UK in 2 weeks. Now, for us as a third party, to be able to do it faster than the original equipment manufacturer is a gain for us, right? And it's a gain. And we are using technology, I believe, the way it should be used, with whatever innovations you can do with it. It's just not a 3D printer or the ability to transfer files across, but how do you convert that into a business opportunity? So yeah, I mean, to answer in short, low-cost labor is not going to work out in future. It's going to be smart working
Yes.
at all levels, not just engineers, workers, or managers, but at all levels. And put things together, bring technologies together uh, to give the best to your customer.
So can we agree that in future, India will be a winner for two reasons? One is our consumer market, and the second is our innovation edge that we will have, because we have large numbers of people in that segment who are brought up to be innovative, and who our education systems, everything support that. Scale much larger than anywhere in the world, which is what made us do well in the IT industry. So equally well we will do in the innovation segment, because we have enough depth to be able to out innovate the world, even in manufacturing, in any of these technology areas. So we do have a very bright future, but the context of jobless growth will remain. And possibly jobless growth is not a business problem. Jobless growth is a societal problem. And possibly the society will need to shape to models such as different alternate taxation models, models such as support for people as they have in certain countries. You know, if you're below a certain income threshold, then the state gives you some money, right? And then promoting alternate careers, such as in the world of entertainment, or there could be so many areas where we will have new roles and new jobs come up other than in that innovation layer, and there'll be less of the traditional labor jobs where people basically use their arms and legs. They'll use more of their mind than use their arms and legs to that extent. Now, I'd just like to move on to some of the questions which we've received from our audience, because if I don't do that, then they won't invite me again, and I thoroughly enjoy these chats. So despite my friendship with Amitabh Datta, I'll be sacked if I don't ask a few questions which the audience has put up. Now, these questions are...
Problem, sir, when
Yeah.
I was moderating.
Right.
Go ahead.
So these questions are clearly given your stature. The questions are not entirely all to do with business. There are some very interesting questions on geopolitics, on politics, on and also on global trade and so on. So I'd like to start off with the first question, more on trade, and then I'll start drawing you into more and more controversial zones. Okay, starting off with...
I'm an engineer, just remember.
Right, less controversial zone. Okay. So was it a mistake for India not to join the RCEP? Is it a blunder, long-term blunder? What is your view?
I think in treaty like that, every country should look out for itself. And I believe that we were worried about our farmers at that time. If we don't get what we want, I don't think we should be part of that. There is a give and take, and we know that certain countries had grouped together. We know that Chinese investments in Thailand and Vietnam. Thailand, we have free trade agreements. So, there were issues about country of origin, enough local value added, which were also, I think, not answered adequately. We should be in a trade bloc, but we should be in a trade bloc that addresses our concerns, is my answer. And if we can get the rest of them to accept what we say, then I think it would be a great idea. As a nation, for me personally and my company, we're already in there, right? And obviously that gives us opportunities, and we are seeing the opportunities of Thailand being in there.
Okay. So that's interesting. So companies have the opportunity to be there, even if the nation as a nation doesn't necessarily, be there. So I think that drives another very interesting point of Indian multinationals. So you can be proud of being a company of Indian heritage and origin, and yet be inclusive and be a global corporation. So do you see this as a trend which will, there was some excitement around this around 10, 15 years ago when it started, and then, but it's stagnated a little bit, or has it not stagnated a little bit?
In my industry, I think there is a company in Calcutta which is just as big, and also going all out. And I'm very happy that they are also successful. I think in each of these cases, the question is, why are you doing it? Why are you becoming a multinational? For us, the answer was very easy. We were a big fish in a small pond that was opening up, right? And allowing other bigger fish to come in. And so how do we use the advantages that we have and grow globally? So that's what we did. I know we've made some huge mistakes. Fortunately, they've not been company breaking mistakes, but we've lost money in certain countries. We've walked out from some places, but over a period of time, and if you have that perseverance and if you have that uh, will to go on, I think you can continue and be global. I think as a country or as Indian companies, we have no choice. The world is going to open up regardless of what politicians want to do. It's going to be a smaller and smaller world. And the opportunities are going to be greater and greater. So I think every company should, if it makes sense to them, attempt to be multinationals. I think most of European companies are multinationals. They operate across. You learn a lot more about yourself, about your own products, about what consumers want from you when you are a multinational organization. We grew because we were exporting. When my great-grandfather was running the company, he was exporting to Europe. My grandfather, when he started exporting diesel engines, and that too to Germany, the government at that time used to control imports and exports, and they said, no, you don't need an export permit, you need an import permit. You don't understand the difference between import and export, right? So we have always, as a group, looked at exporting as something that is a requirement for our business, that every market, there is always a cycle in these markets. There are ups and downs, and you need to smoothen them out for the growth of your organization. And if you go outside, whether it is finish, whether it is efficiency, whether it is the way your product looks, uh, all this matters. And you learn a lot, and you make a far better product for your own customers when you are in a market that's hugely competitive. That's my feeling. So there's no choice. You have to do it.
I'll ask you one last question because I promised you one or two difficult, controversial questions, and I don't want to disappoint
Don't
you.
ask me about Mamta Didi, and because I don't understand Bengali politics.
That is exactly the question that we want to ask you, but differently. Okay, which is, in the US, perhaps the election was influenced. The single big issue was COVID-19. Okay, do you anticipate that similarly this could be a issue, a political issue in India?
COVID-19?
Yes, the pandemic, and handling the pandemic and so on. Would it influence elections globally as it has in the US, and also would it influence elections in India? So this is that typical controversial question, and then
I don't think it will affect elections in India. If you see the US, with 4% of the world's population, has 25% of its cases and 20% of the deaths. In India, I think we are still in double digits as to the number of cases per million and the number of deaths per or 100,000 cases or something like that. So, and if you see our outlook towards life. I guess we believe that, okay, I die now and I come back. So maybe I'll have a better life. I don't know. I mean, this answer might be a wrong one, but
No, I thought that was.
I don't think it'll affect in India. And the government, I think, has been handling it. I mean, they may be
Yes.
handling it well. I think I mean, it's trying it to the best of its ability, is what I think.
I thought that was a brilliant answer to an unfair question. And I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation with you. And I'd now like to request my colleague and committee member of CMA, Anil Garg, to deliver a vote of thanks.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, Anil isn't there. He got stuck up somewhere. So
Yeah.
I've got the pleasant task of formally proposing a vote of thanks. Well, thank you very much, Sanjay. I mean, it's been great. I mean, it's been a real learning experience, and it's been fascinating. And most importantly, I think you've been very frank, forthright, and as I had said earlier, you've done such a lot in your organization, your family, and I think the most important part is that you must be committed to it. I know of a few companies who actually have in the crisis, they've shaved off a lot of costs, and in the process, what has happened is they're currently in a fairly complacent sort of a situation. They're actually making money without growing the top lines and all this. It's more saving of cost. But I think the important part is that they also got to realize that at some point in time or the other, they have to look at what now. And I think a company like yours has always been doing that. And thank you for sharing some of the thoughts. And thank you once again for being with us. And we look forward to having you with us physically in Calcutta, as in when it is possible, because last year, if you recall, you were supposed to have come to Guwahati and to Calcutta for our annual award ceremony, which and unfortunately you couldn't make it. But as in when we can, and as in when you can travel to our part of the world, even, I mean, we're most welcome, and we'd love to have you with us. Thank you very much once again. And thank you all the people who attended this fascinating webinar. And thank you, Joydeep. I think you've been fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sanjay.
Thank you, Lord. Thanks. Good night.
So I'll give you a call later on, Sanjay. I'll give you this. No? Thank you.